Well, good evening. I guess sounds like the mic is adequate. Yeah, good. Since it sounds like I'm shouting at myself, it must be loud enough. So, as most of you know, we start every session with two things. And this is lingo: refuge and bodhicitta. So we have a really short prayer, but there's a million refuge prayers and a million bodhicitta prayers, and we use a really short one. But the meaning is always there. In refuge, the word refuge is talking about what can we rely on. So rather than looking at our normal places for happiness, our relationships, our jobs, our whatever, our homes, our travels, our dogs, we realize that those sources of happiness actually can't give us what we might call genuine happiness or lasting happiness. So when we sit down, we remind ourselves that there's something deeper that is where we need to look for genuine happiness. And from a Buddhist point of view, we say that's from the teachings of the Buddha, but even deeper than that, we'd say it's just because we all have the potential to be Buddhas, and that is really a refuge for us. So further in the prayer, refuge and bodhicitta being the other important piece that we reflect on before we practice. That's kind of captured in the prayer that we have here, where we say that now I'm going to practice my meditation in order to release all beings from their particular suffering and establish them in lasting peace and happiness. So that's the bodhicitta part, which we translate mind of enlightenment. And really that's what the entire path of the Dharma is about, is bodhicitta. And bodhicitta has its two aspects that we talk about, the ultimate and the relative. And the ultimate bodhicitta, we can say, is recognizing and eventually dwelling in the recognition of the very nature of existence, the nature of ourselves, the nature of reality. So that's what we're referring to when we talk about realizing emptiness, or other words like non-dual wisdom, so wisdom that actually takes us beyond the world of good and bad. So that's ultimate bodhicitta. And then relative bodhicitta is essentially the wish for others to be free from suffering and to be happy. So that's loving kindness and compassion. But not just wishing this in small ways, but all the way to full enlightenment. So we say, until the summit of enlightenment, I and all beings. So we're wishing this for ourselves, but we're wishing for enlightenment for all beings. And along with making the wish, we hope and want and try to direct our activities in life to help make that wish come to actual fruition. But we do talk a lot about aspiration and motivation in Buddhism. recognizing that without it, say in this case, if we don't wish to benefit others, then it's kind of unlikely that we would just automatically engage in activities that do benefit others. So we feel it's worthwhile to practice cultivating and strengthening this kind of wish in our minds. Sort of like if you don't wish to go to New York at some point, you're just unlikely to end up there. And one of the characteristics of this view of bodhicitta is that it's vast. So why we say that is largely because we really are meant to think about and contemplate and try to hold this kind of loving kindness and compassion for all beings. So that means really all, no one excluded. And all is big, all is encompassing. And actually it's limitless. We don't even know, we couldn't even say how many beings there are. So to have this ability to include all beings, this can be said to be based in equanimity. It's really, in some ways, it's the equanimity that makes us able to relate to the idea of all beings. Because normally we have a habitual division of the world into good and bad. We have people that we meet or know divided into friends and enemies, and maybe just the no comment of indifference. But not even just simple good and bad. We have a lot of different shades within that. And when we think about the people that we know, maybe we think, oh, I don't have any enemies, but probably I have people that I like better, this one more than the other one. And we have somebody that, okay, this one, I'd jump in front of a moving car for that one, but not the other one. And we notice this one is irritating, the other one is so sweet. Well, today they are, maybe not yesterday. So if we look at these kind of feelings that we have towards others, we might notice, I can notice, that these kind of responses are related to how well or how poorly those others serve my interests. So, the one who emphasizes how smart or kind I am goes on a little better list for me than the one who seems to have decided that I do dumb things or I'm a mean person. So the idea is that with equanimity, or I'd say with the practice of equanimity, we do work at loosening this up. I mean, eventually we would lose this bias. That's really almost impossible for me to imagine. It's a very long-term proposition. But even going a little bit in that direction can make an impact for us. So with equanimity, we see that Each person's happiness is as important as another person's. And amazingly, if I think about it, it's just as important as mine. And the happiness of the person I like is as important as that of the person in the don't like group. But it's not a stepping back into some kind of indifference, some gauzy place where we say, oh well, it's all the same, so whatever. It's actually that we want to attend to everyone closely. So in this prayer that we say that we would like to release all beings from their particular suffering. And I think it's kind of a nice thing about this prayer, because it recognizes that everyone has their unique situation and everyone is suffering in some way, and that we could care about each one of these situations. So as we say our prayer, which we do 3 times, and start our practice, perhaps we can imagine bringing this immense and inclusive view to bear, doing our best to include all beings under the umbrella of our bodhicitta aspiration.
Until the summit of enlightenment is reached, I and all beings go for refuge to the sources of true refuge. I will now practice the absorption of calm abiding in order to release all beings from their particular suffering and establish them in lasting peace and happiness. Until the summit of enlightenment is reached, I and all beings go for refuge to the sources of true refuge. I will now practice the absorption of calm abiding in order to release all beings from their particular suffering and establish them in lasting peace and happiness. Until the summit of enlightenment is reached, I and all beings go for refuge to the sources of true refuge. I will now practice the absorption of calm abiding in order to release all beings from their particular suffering and establish them in lasting peace and happiness.
So now we engage in the meditation practice, which we call calm abiding. A lot of forms of calm abiding, so you have your choice what to use tonight. But their simple, wonderful, and reliable form that we like to offer is to use the breath as an object. So when we say an object, it's kind of like a tether for the mind. If your mind was a tether ball flying around. And starting out, it's nice to review our posture. The general approach can be to think of being straight. Like, is your back straight? Are you sitting evenly? But then within that straightness, relaxing, being comfortable, releasing tension where you can. You can soften the gaze. Usually we have our eyes open, but looking downward, not really focused on anything. You can see if you can relax your face around the eyes, the jaw. Sometimes we hold a lot of tension there. Now, place your attention on the breath and just think of resting your attention there. And when we say that, it really means that you attend or notice the sensations associated with breathing wherever they might occur in your body. If you feel the air at the nostrils, or you feel your clothing against your skin as your abdomen or chest moves. And with this method, we don't need to change our breathing. Just let it be however it is, changeable from one breath to the next. And then the main critical instruction is that whenever you find yourself having lost track of your meditation, suddenly you realize that you forgot you were even doing it, perhaps. Whenever that happens, simply return and replace your attention on the breath. No fuss, no scolding. Just return again and again, however many times it happens. And as you continue, just do your best to maintain the qualities of relaxation and alertness. Kind of balancing those two throughout. And we'll have about half an hour now of practice, and a couple of times I'll give a sound on the bell for mini stretch breaks. But anyone who needs to move or shift your position, it's perfectly fine to do that when you need to.
By this virtue may I quickly realize Mahamudra and establish all beings without exception in this state.
Thank you all. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you.
So now we'll have our tea break. Let's see, announcements. There is a Sangha meeting coming up on Saturday, 1:30 to 4. And it sounds like the format is going to be that Lama Michael will talk to us about things that he feels are important for the transition that we're kind of in and kind of going into, and then hopefully there's supposed to be also time for questions and discussion. And I think the Death and Dying practice group has started meeting on the first Mondays of the month instead of Tuesdays. That's coming up this Monday. And is there anything else, Linda, that you can think of? Wednesday night, Chenry Sig. And there's, the other thing is that we have this new thing where you can write questions. Well, there's two question types, right? You can write questions that would be discussed here if you don't want to say your questions, and then questions like for the board and the organization, I don't know. So you can make use of that. Anyway, let's have our tea break and come back in about 10 or so minutes.
Yeah.